Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in AP English. Our study of Dante's Inferno now continues with Cantos 26 and 27. We are in Circle 8, Bolgia 8, the false counselors. And here we will meet, finally, Ulysses. We've been gesturing towards him. Hey, let me ask you guys this question. Do you think there is a point when greatness begins to somehow recognize itself as such? You know what I'm saying? I mean, we've played this game in 303 before. Let's play it again. For example, what I'm asking is, do you think there's a moment when Beethoven pushes himself back from the keyboard in the middle of the Ninth Symphony and says to himself, nobody's ever going to do it any better than this? Or, for example, Michelangelo, maybe, who, for example, is halfway through the Sistine work and he looks at it and he goes, this may be the best thing that anybody can ever do. Do you think that's possible? I don't know. Maybe Whitman in the middle of Song of the Open Road. Maybe it's Bono as he was getting ready to produce Joshua Tree album or any other album of U2 maybe. I think we're here at it with Dante. I do. And I want to make this argument. I think that Dante recognizes at the conclusion of Canto 25, he is in complete control of his poetic genius. We're even going to hear some of this gestured at in Canto 26. But consider just for a moment, he's already taken on Ovid in his transformative and transforming and metamorphoses kind of project at the end of Canto 25. And then where does he go? He goes to Ulysses. That is to say, he picks up on Homer and on Virgil and he says, I think it's time for me to step into the ring. Now, of course, this has been gestured at, no question, in his visit to Limbo. But I think the argument is a pretty solid one. In 26-27, we will see the birth of Machiavelli and the Prince. Although in our AP curriculum we studied it earlier because of our political focus with Plato and Republic, we're going to see the origins of Machiavelli in this Canto 26 and 27 to follow, but for sure 26, we're going to see the birth of Tennyson's great rendering of Ulysses as his poem Ulysses. You'll see more about that in a moment. And finally, I think we see the birth of T.S. Eliot. He actually, from passage 27, Canto 27, he actually will take the inscription that comes before the love song of Geoffrey Prufrock that we studied in our junior year. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon our table. Oh, do not ask what is it. Let us go and make our visit. In the room the women come and go talking of Michelangelo. I think we're going to see as well the book of Acts from the New Testament is also standing right behind Dante, looking over Dante the poet's shoulder as well. You'll remember maybe in your study of the New Testament that in Acts 2, chapter 2, verse 3, we have tongues of fire. We're going to see these tongues of fire. I think Dante recognizes exactly what he's doing. And I think it's the genius of Dante that right here, coming at the end now of Inferno, remember at 26-27, we're closing in on the final circle, circle number 9, right, is the last circle of hell. And as we get there, we're already recognizing, Dante is recognizing, he's doing something really important. So obviously we're going to sit up and take notice. Now, if you haven't been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, go to the AP folder. My hope is that you've been following our stuff from the very beginning in our conversations with the Iliad, the Odyssey, and especially the Aeneid. Why the Aeneid is so important for our study of Dante is most scholars argue Dante didn't know about Homer other than through Virgil. In other words, Dante didn't read Greek, he didn't know the Iliad and the Odyssey. He knew about Odysseus through, and Achilles, and Diomedes through his study of Aeneid. That's what most scholars believe. And we're going to see some of that maybe here as well. Now, we've already worked with Cantos 1 through 25. Let's do a real quick summary. I think it's important, I think Dante teaches us, that if you're going forward, you have to be always looking backwards to kind of know where you've been so that you can get a sense of the landscape. So let's do it quickly. Again, in Canto 1, it's April the 7th, 1300, that Thursday but before Friday of Good Friday. He's 35 years old, he's lost in a dark wood. We're going to come to these lines of Canto 1 again in this lecture. I think in many ways 26-27 is like a return almost back to the beginning of the poem. I'll show you why. Virgil shows up, Canto 2 tells, at the end of Canto 1, Canto 2 tells Dante, Beatrice sent him. Canto 3, the inscription of hell, abandoned hope, and the uncommitted. Canto 4 is the limbo, the circle of the unbaptized pagans, and of course this is where Homer himself and Virgil and Aristotle will be. Cantos 5, 6, and 7 of the incontinent, Circle 2 of Canto 5, the Jack lovers with Francesca and Paolo, as well as Dido there, right? And a mention of Achilles. He gets there because of his affections for a girl. We're going to come back to Achilles and a girl in Canto 26, 27 as well, which is kind of bizarre. In Circle 3 of Canto 6, the gluttons and Chaco. In Circle 7, Canto 4, the prodigals and the avaricious, as well as Circle 5, the wrathful and the river Styx. And again, language is difficult. We're going to see some of that. What is it that Prufrock says in Love Song of Geoffrey Prufrock? It is impossible to say just what I mean. That line directly transcending from Dante and Inferno. In Canto 8, we got the Phalanges taking them across the river, the marsh Styx. Canto 9, the gates of Dis are open. Canto 10, Dante's conversation with Farinata and Cavalcante. Canto 11, that's an important canto you remember because that's the topography or the cartography of hell, and we get that kind of map of all of hell. And then in Canto 12, we begin with the violent, the second area. If the incontinent is the first, the violent is the second. Canto 12, Circle 7, Round 1, Mentor and Centaurs, violent against neighbors and Pelagian. In Canto 13, Circle 7, Round 2, violent against self. This is the suicides of the talking trees. Canto 14, Circle 7, Ring 3, the violent against God, the blasphemers, and Campanius. Canto 15, Circle 7, Ring 3, violence against nature. These are the Sodomites and Brunito Latini, as well as Canto 16, Circle 7 again, and the three Sodomites from Florence who around Dante dance in a ring. Again, we have already pointed out two things about this notion. For Dante in the church of the medieval period, all sexual acts that do not lead directly to childbirth are considered unnatural. And Dante the poet seems to speak most gently about this circle of sinners. It's quite remarkable, as we talked about in earlier lectures. Canto 17, Circle 7, Ring 3 of the violent against art. These are the users. They jump onto Gerion's back to ride down into Canto 18, Circle 8. This is the Malaboge. The simple fraud is here. And then we got different Bolges. Bolge 1, the panders and seducers. Bolge 2, the flatterers, where they eat human poop. Canto 19, we have Bolgia 3, the Simoniacs, and Pope Nicholas III. Dante the Reformer, we're going to have some of that coming back in Canto 27 again. Put a note to yourself. Canto 20, we have in Bolgia 4, the Fortune Tellers, Tiresias with his head on backwards, and we got tears running down the back through the cleft of the buttocks. So it's an amazing, gross picture, right? Cantos 21, 22, we saw together as Bolgia 5. This is the Berators and the Farting Demons, and we have that kind of interesting, almost like comic rendition. In Canto 23, we have Bolgia number 6. These are the hypocrites and the heavy robes, and Caiaphas, the betrayer of Christ, crucified on the ground. We treated Canto 24, 25 together. That's Bolgia 7. These are the thieves. We have the up on your feet passage, and we have men transforming into snakes and snakes transforming into men. It's quite a remarkable picture, and as I say, I think Dante recognizes at the conclusion of 25, he really is at the height of his poetic genius, and now it's time to take on Homer, now it's time to take on Virgil, now it's time to give birth to Machiavelli. Remarkable. Now again, the hope is that you're reading this material on your own and using me. By this point in your reading of Inferno, you ought to be able to pick this poem up now on your own. Well, I think we've given you enough tools to be able to do this on your own, I hope. Our learning theory is hypercritical, and Dante in many ways teaches us what he learned from St. Augustine and then the Confessions, how to read. Namely, that we're always looking to connect new information to old information in meaningful ways by answering 3 guiding questions when we read. Level 1, what does the text say? Level 2, what does the text mean? 2a, themes, messages. To be here, we're concentrating on symbolism and irony, lots of it going on in this canto, and as well, we're going to focus on Dante as poet, as philosopher, poet, as politician, and as philosopher. We're going to see a lot of all of those. Finally, at level 3, we ask, how can I relate to this information in some meaningful way? 3a, how can I relate it to other texts we've studied in AP, beginning, of course, with the Iliad? And then finally, how can I relate this information to my own self and my own life? Again, these aren't classics unless you somehow can relate to them, all right? Don't take my word or any other person's word for it. I hope that your study of Dante, like your study of Confessions, like your study of the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, or Chaucer, or whatever else we've studied, has somehow been something you can own, something that you can appropriate in your own world, and it makes sense to you. That's the best way, in my estimation, to prep, by the way, for the AP exam. I think it's the best way to prep for life, to have ideas that you can relate to. All right, let's do a real quick, brief plot summary of 26 and 27. Virgil will have his conversation with Ulysses, not Dante, it'll be Virgil, because of the linguistic barrier, right? And we're going to get a death story, we're going to get a death narrative for Ulysses. After our study of the Odyssey, you'll remember, and how we kind of finished making those observations. Here we go. We predicted that would happen, now we're finally here. Then in Canto 27, we're going to have Dante speaking with Guido Malafeltro, and we're going to get more Boniface VIII jacking on, as we've already seen. Right? Now, I think again, in these two cantos, no question, we're going to see the birth of Tennyson, we're going to see the birth of Machiavelli, we're going to see the birth of T.S. Eliot, maybe even. So let's go to work with the cantos, see how well we do with these, and then we'll come back to levels 2 and 3. The opening of Canto 26 now, I want to actually not begin, and this is going to seem strange at first, but I think that makes sense. I don't want to begin with Canto 26. I want to begin with the opening lines of Canto 1. Midway on our life's journey. It's fun, I think, at this point to look back and get a sense of where we've gone. Midway on our life's journey, I found myself in dark woods, the right road lost. To tell about those woods is hard, so tangled and rough and savage, that thinking of it now, I feel the old fear stirring. Death is hardly more bitter, and yet to treat the good I found there as well, I'll tell you what I saw, though how I came to enter I cannot well say, being so full of sleep, whatever moment it was I began to blunder off the true path. But when I came to stop below a hill that marked one end of the valley that had pierced my heart with terror, I looked up toward the crest and saw its shoulders already mantled in rays of that bright planet that shows the road to everyone, whatever our journey. We're going to get this mountain, by the way, in Ulysses' story, Purgatory and all of that. Then I could feel the terror begin to ease that churned in my heart's lake all through the night. And then we get this amazing simile, which is where we want to start. As one still panting, ashore from dangerous seas, looks back at the deep he has escaped, my thought returned, still fleeing, to regard that grim defile that never left any alive who stayed in it. Now, of course, no question, Dante the poet wants us to make a reference to Odysseus on the island of the Phaeacians. Finally, he makes it there, and he looks back at the ocean, and he goes, whew, that was a close one. We're going to have the same game being played all over again right here. So this is where we will begin. Ulysses and the near drowning will take us now to the opening lines of Canto 26. However, before we get there, I want to turn, as I've done several times with you already, and I want to play a game with you with Robert Pinsky, our great translator, who is not just a poet in poetry, but a poet in prose as well. And I'm going to read the opening little essay for his notes section for Canto 26. All the characters, he says, who speak in the Inferno are near contemporaries of the poet, except for Ulysses, who will be mentioned several times more in the course of the comedian. The ideals Ulysses expressed are reminiscent of those espoused by an equally self-confident Dante in an unfinished philosophic work, the Convivio. The voyage of Ulysses was taken in antiquity as an allegory for the education of the soul, whose return home was taken as a sign of its deliverance. Although he did not know Homer's text, Dante certainly knew of its happy ending. By changing it, he suggests that no one should survive such a journey on one's own. Geryon is the emblem of the pilgrim's journey, and Ulysses' voyage is its counterpart. The difference between the two voyages is that Ulysses undertakes his insane flight alone, while Virgil guides the pilgrim on the shoulders of the monster. This is much like the opposition in Canto 1 between the pilgrim's abortive attempt to climb the mountain on his own and the longer guided journey in which Virgil leads him. It might be said that the successful journey of the pilgrim begins after he survives the metaphoric drowning. We just read it of Canto 1, right? Lines 18 through 21, to which Ulysses fell victim. What separates their fate is the will of God, as we will see in Canto 26, line 134. Dante may have known that Aeneas' speech to his men in Virgil's poem was molded on Odysseus' speech to his men in the Odyssey. Dante reconstructs an imagined Homeric archetype by echoing Aeneas' "Oh, brothers," we'll get to these lines, but transforming Aeneas' serenity into Ulysses' thirst for the unknown. This extraordinary act of literary triangulation suggests that Ulysses' disaster foreshadowed Aeneas' success upon which Rome was founded. The result is the portrait of a Ulysses whose individualism is the antithesis of Aeneas' filial and civic piety. You'll remember pietas is that whole notion from our study of the Aeneid. His intellectual pride is not unlike that of the younger Dante, whom he perhaps represents. Dante stands apart here as the two ancient figures speak in the high style of ancient tragedy. This is a matter not of language, but of the rhetoric the ancients considered appropriate for the discussion of lofty themes. In the Gospels, Christ established a new Christian rhetoric by speaking of the loftiest matters in the humblest idiom. When Dante speaks of Virgil's poem as tragedy and his own as comedy, he means that his poem is written in the humble speech of sacred scripture. He illustrates the point in the next canto when Guido di Montefeltro undercuts the rhetorical decorum by interrupting in his native dialect. We'll come back to Canto 27 after we read 26. Rejoice! Now we're going to start with some nasty satire. Dante is politician right away. Rejoice, O Florence, since you were so great, beating your wings on land and on the sea, that in hell too your name is spread about. Hey, Florentines, be happy. You're known all over the world, but you're really known in hell. I found among those there for their thievery 5 of your citizens. This takes us back, of course, to the last canto, which carries shame for me, and you gain no high honor thereby. But if we dream the truth near morning time, then you will feel much time has gone what Prato and others crave for you. This is either the neighboring town of Prato, or it may be Cardinal Prato of 1304, right? And come already, it would not have come too soon. Dante the prophet, Florence is going to struggle. Of course, part of this is because Florence kicked me out and won't let me back. And truly let it, since it must come to pass, for it will all the heavier weigh me down, the older I become. And there's such a personal moment here for Dante the poet. In other words, Dante the poet is breaking one of his rules about never wanting to tell the future. But this is different because he has a sense he knows what he's talking about. And secondly, he says, the older I get, the more weighed down I become. Remember those robes that are a part of the previous circle, right, where they're weighed down. We left the place, and on the stairway that the jutting stone a little while before had offered us on our descent, my guide climbed up again and drew me up to pursue our lonely course. Without the hand, the foot could not go on. It's so high. Climbing that jagged rocks, ridges, rocks, and spurs. I sorrowed then, and when I turned my mind to what I saw next, sorrow again, and force my art to make its genius more restrained than is my usual bent, lest it should run where virtue doesn't. So that if any kind star, some better thing has made it mine, I won't myself negate the gift in me. I think, like I said, Dante recognizes he's done it. He already knows it. He's already at that moment, as we opened our lecture, he's already at that moment where he goes, you know what? I'm doing something really important right now, and I'm going to keep going. Right? As many as the fireflies, we get an interesting simile here. As many as the fireflies a peasant has seen resting on a hill that time of year when he who lights the world least hides his face from us, and at the hour when the fly gives way to the mosquito all down the valley's face, where perhaps he gathers grapes and tills the ground with flames that numerous was hell's 8th foss glittering. So we get all these firefly-like lights. These will be our tongues of fire. We're going again to Acts chapter 2, verse 3. As I saw these glittering tongues of fire, as I saw when I attained a place from which its floor could be made out. And now we're getting another interesting simile, only this is a biblical epic simile. Is Dante taking on the Bible as well? He first will reference Elisha from 2 Kings 2, 23 through 24. You'll maybe remember the story that the old man is made fun of by some kids, and then a bear comes out and kills the kids. And then, of course, Elisha sees Elijah in 2 Kings 2, 9 through 12 ascend into heaven in a chariot of fire. And as the one avenged by bears divined that what he saw was Elisha's chariot carried by rearing horses to heaven's domain, for with his eyes he couldn't follow it except by looking at the flame alone, like a small cloud ascending, so Each flame moves along the ditch's gullet, with not one showing its plunder, though every flame contrives to steal away a sinner. Each flame is a sinner. I had climbed up to balance where the bridge's high point gives a better view, and if I didn't grip rocks, and if I didn't grip a rock, I would have fallen from where I stood without a push. In other words, it's so high up and he starts leaning over, he could have fallen. Seeing how from the top I gazed intently down, my master said, this is now Virgil, within the flames are spirits. Each one here enfolds himself in what burns him. It's a remarkable line. Enfolds himself in what burns him. I replied, my master, to hear you say it makes me sure, but I already thought it. In other words, Dante, the student, is evolving. In other words, I already knew that. You know you're doing something right when, as a student, you can already predict what the instructor is going to say, and you go, I knew he was going to say that. I knew she was going to go there. That's a good sign, in other words. But I already thought it already, too. I wanted to ask you, who is in that fire, which at its top is so split into two, it seems to surge from the pyre Eteocles shared with his brother. This is the Eteocles Polynices reference. By the way, make a note of how that, of course, that fight between the two brothers, we know this, of course, because of our study of Sophocles, right? That fight between the two brothers led to the 7 against Thebes, and we've had the 7 against Thebes referenced several times for Dante as well. Now Virgil will answer. In it go, tormented Ulysses and Diomedes. They are together in one flame. Now that's interesting because, of course, we saw them together in Iliad 10. Dante doesn't know about them in Iliad 10. The way Dante knows about Ulysses and Diomedes is from Aeneid. And of course in Aeneid, remember, Diomedes is given tremendous respect. Mentioned in the opening lines, you'll recall, right? That Aeneas will right away speak, and then when Aeneas speaks, also mentioning Diomedes. You'll remember Diomedes turns them down at the end to come and try to defend and fight against Aeneas. He says, I've had enough of it. He answered, in it go tormented Ulysses and Diomedes, enduring vengeance together as they did wrath. This will be the circle, by the way. We should have said this maybe early on. This will be the circle of the evil counselors. And it's interesting, of all the places that Ulysses and Diomedes are going to get put, this is where they're going to get put, okay? And in their flame, they grieve for their device, the horse that made the doorway through which went forth the Romans' noble seed. In other words, for the Trojan horse, Diomedes and Ulysses